Hey everyone, it's Necromancer1040 here. So, I guess this is a meta-analysis video I'm going to make. I've been meaning to do this for a while, but I just want to get this video out for you guys. I've been meaning to do it ever since the October ban list, and it's well overdue, so I just wanted to hold out for a while and just kind of see how the meta formed together. So that's why, if you're wondering, if it took so long to get this video out, that's why. But I feel now that we had the recent events such as YCS London and YCS Lima, Peru. Also this weekend there was YCS Pasadena and Pro Play tournaments. So I feel like we can get a better gauge on which decks are going to be the most relevant in this meta for November 2019 and onward until the next ban list. So oddly enough, Sky Strikers won YCS London, even though they're not the top tier deck of this format. So we'll get into more specifics as to why I think they won that event. And so yeah, let's get into it. So Sky Strikers, I will say they are a tier 1 deck. They're definitely within that realm. They're not a tier 2 deck. They're competing with Thunder Dragons, as well as Orcists and Salamangrates. So they're definitely no pushovers. They won YCS London, of course, um, but the reason why I feel they are able to do that, or they have been able to do that in the past, is because they've been able to adapt so effectively. What I mean by them adapting so effectively is they're able to go through so many changes and adapt into basically a bunch of different decks, whether if they're an engine or if they just mesh well with a bunch of other types of decks. Um, so they've managed to survive that way, like in terms of Sky Striker Trick Stars, that you've seen them take on that form in terms of a Sky Striker build. So they've changed this several ways, but I feel their biggest strength is they've embraced trap cards. The reason why I say that, you might be wondering, oh, why are they so effective with trap cards? That's probably that's probably because the other decks aren't using trap cards. So if you take a look at most other decks, they may at most use evenly match and infinite impermanence, and maybe some other random tech option. But for the most part, you don't have a trap heavy lineup in other decks. It's just Orcists or Thunder Dragons, for example. But Sky Strikers, they've really embraced that, and they've really held their opponents off with just trap cards more than just infinite impermanence and evenly matched. So I feel they're getting the drop on the other meta decks, and other meta deck players are starting to realize, hey, traps aren't something we shouldn't fully exclude. So I'd see that as a total positive for this meta format, because we haven't seen traps actually been in the meta game for a while now. They're actually on a they've been on a decline for a couple of years. But on top of that, they still have Widow Anchor. They have Widow Anchor now down at 1 because of the recent ban list, so that gives them a strong edge to still be in this meta format. So Widow Anchor still being a strategy in their build, along with them taking on different builds, along with accepting trap cards, a more trap card heavy build into their lineup, is I feel the reason why they've managed to stay relevant, even though they should be biting the dust essentially. And now that they're overstaying their welcome, I guess in some people's view, but I guess you can consider Sky Strikers kind of an underrated slash slept on deck in terms of the meta scene. Um, so yeah, I wouldn't sleep on them. Definitely prepare for them, and that leads me into the other deck that we're going to talk to. So Orcas decks, they're definitely tier 1 decks, but I would say the Orcas deck is by far the best deck of this format. So the reason why I say that is because they're able to do strong matchups against pretty much every other deck, but especially they're able to easily, oh, not too easily, but they're effective at combating the second most dangerous deck in this format, which, in my personal opinion, is Thunder Dragons. So Thunder Dragons are able to pump out cards like Colossus, which basically stop people from searching. And the main monster in Orcus decks, Dengirsu, basically doesn't care about that. Dengirsu can attach machine monsters that are banished onto him, and he can also send cards to the grave, so he evades Colossus and many other strategies from other meta decks in a very real sense, and basically they can still kick off their strategies without being hindered too much. Orcus did kind of fall out of grace in terms of being a splashable engine in other decks ever since they lost Nightmare Mermaid. That's because of the ban list. But I think that's ultimately better in terms of for the meta, so you don't see a bunch of really very loopy or spammy plays in this meta format. So they are still by far the most, I would say, strongest deck. And the reason why they're so effective at doing that is because it has very consistent search power that are able to crank out pretty decent monsters, kind of like Thunder Dragons, though maybe not as strong. But Dengirsu basically is strong, is one of their stronger monsters, and he's no pushover. Kind of like Thunder Dragons. Orcists can protect themselves, and they can do a lot of disruption in your opponent's basically turn, which is probably their strongest, most competitive edge against every other deck. I don't think I think by far they excel at that than any other deck. So that's mainly probably what's in their favor in terms of being top one or top tier deck of the format. So yeah, if you think about it, they don't have very many shortcomings. They don't have very many weaknesses. I mean, they do, like every deck, but they're able to overcompensate for that and just push through and basically create scary boards. So yeah, with that, I would strongly declare that Orcists are the number one deck of this format. And that brings us to the other deck, which I've been talking about a lot already, which is Thunder Dragons. So Thunder Dragons, they are a tier 1 deck, but I would place them in second place in terms of the tier 1 deck, mainly because Thunder Dragons, they're kind of in an interesting spot right now. They have obviously their strongest matchup is against Sky Strikers. They're able to push out so many huge beaters onto the board, and Sky Strikers kind of have a problem dealing with that. Their biggest, I guess, leg up is Colossus, which, as I've mentioned before, you can shut down your opponent's searchability cards. So that basically kills almost half the strategies of a lot of meta decks. On top of that, Thunder Dragons, they also have a bunch of protection effects. I mean, it's not like different protection effects, but their protection effect basically involves them preventing them from being destroyed by banishing thunder monsters from the grave, and that can be really scary, especially if you're facing down Colossus and trying to destroy Colossus, and he just activates his effect and he can't be destroyed. So that's scary when you crank out huge monsters like that and you can't really put them away. They're able to effectively recycle cards, so even if you do manage to get a Colossus off the field, Thunder Dragons are very efficient at putting them back onto the field and putting that pressure right back onto your opponent. Um, Although they do have a bunch of strong suits, they do have some weaknesses. They are a little bit inconsistent in terms of searching and draw power. I know the main staple card for Thunder Dragons is Allure of Darkness or Pot of Desires. Those are their two main draw cards, but they don't have draw cards that are inherently based around Thunder Dragons. They don't have like a Thunder Dragon draw card, essentially, is what I'm saying. I feel if they did have that, they would easily be the number one deck of the format. They would be able to push out stronger boards, even though they're already able to make crazy boards. But that is one of their shortcomings. Um, but they're able to, on the flip side, another one of their strong suits is they're still able to push out even scarier boards in this other type of Thunder Dragon build, which is the Star Liege Cipher build. So if you don't know what Star Liege Cipher, it's a new card that came out of the most recent set from Chaos Impact. Basically, he allows you to add dragons from your graveyard to your hand, and so that can be pretty problematic for your opponent. If especially what I'm talking about is their recyclability uh, efficiency. So if no matter how many times you manage to blow their monsters off the field, they can especially recycle their resources with this kind of deck. So they can bring back if you manage to send Chaos Dragon Levianeer into the grave, they can bring that back, and then they can activate. They can summon him, and then they can activate his ability, which Levianeer can easily pick apart boards, and that can be really scary, especially if you have a Titan or a Colossus staring you down in mid game. But that's another one of their advantages is they're able to go into other cards besides Thunder Dragons. They're able to tap into just basically generic dragons. So that's a very effective kind of like double strategy that they have going on. Um, Thunder Dragon builds have historically had a hard time against cards like Nibiru that basically just board wipe them. But now they can kind of stop that. They can stop Nibiru because they're able to access these other dragon monsters and just other cards in general. So they can summon out stuff like Borlode Savage Dragon and just negate stuff like Nibiru or Apollosa, or they can actually summon Apollosa too. Um, so that's kind of like their advantage against the basic builds. So this Starliege Cipher build functions more like Thunder Dragon, Danger Thunder is what I'm trying to say. But it's able to protect itself more effectively through negations and able to build its boards a lot more effectively. So with that, Thunder Dragons are definitely a number 2 slot for this kind of meta. And that brings us to the last deck that I've been meaning to talk about is Salamangreat. I know you were expecting Salamangreat, but kind of like Sky Strikers, they've really managed to persist in this meta because I mean they're able to adapt like Sky Strikers. They have a bunch of crazy effects. They have destruction effects. I mean, it's not crazy like in terms of like unique to them, but they're able to access so many other effects. They have destruction effects, they have bounce effects, they have removal effects, they have strong search abilities. They can do a bunch of deck summoning. They can recycle a bunch of their cards, and they definitely take perfect advantage of their graveyard. Though their one shortcoming is that they do lack a little bit of draw power, but that's pretty much overshadowed. That's overshadowed by basically all their other strong suits, is what I'm trying to say. And yeah, I mean they're a really scary deck, and it's hard to. It's kind of crazy to think that they just started out as a structure deck. So Salamangreat, they possess almost all the same strengths that other decks do in this format, and even more. Um, so yeah, especially this is the other strong suit they have. They're able to last the grind game. So if you don't know what that means, is basically most decks they burn out within the first 2 or 3 turns. But Salamangreats they do manage to basically last, and they can outlast your opponent because they just have so many recursion effects. They can recycle a bunch of things. They do take a little bit to set up, so you're probably not going to have as much of an explosive turn one board as other decks would. Um, and that's another shortcoming. They can be easily disrupted within that first turn, and that decides where they pretty much go, how effective they're going to be for the rest of the match. But honestly, Salamangreats, they're just honestly they're great, no pun intended. But yeah, they have so many strong suits that it's their shortcomings are infinitely overshadowed. So yeah, with that, that's kind of my yeah wrap up for this kind of meta analysis. I also just I want to mention one more thing before I forget. There was it's kind of like a blip in this meta format. I don't know if you guys have paid attention, but there was kind of like this weird anti-meta deck. It's basically revolves around the Vanity's Fiend strategy. If you know what I'm talking about, a Vanity's Fiend is this card that is this monster that basically stops special summoning. And this deck uses Vanity's Fiend, it uses Majesty's Fiend, and it uses all those Vanities cards that basically stun the meta so heavily in this format. and this person basically ran with it and just swept the tournament. He did very well. And so I thought that was worth mentioning because it is very interesting to see this happen when it does, because it does point out one of the very big fundamental weaknesses within the meta and I guess modern day Yu-Gi-Oh! If you can shut down your opponent from special summoning, that really is a very straight win, pretty much most of the time. But yeah, I just wanted to discuss that because I found that really interesting. But well, that pretty much wraps up my I guess my meta analysis for this video. Sorry this took a while to get out. I just wanted to see how like stuff would turn out in the meta. But yeah, if you want to help me support content like more deck profiles, oh yeah, and watch out for the Exodia combo tutorial. I've been trying to do that. I mean, if you know Exodia one turn wins, they take a while to happen. So, but that will happen in the near future. But if you want to support my ability to be able to do that, you can support me on Patreon, and it honestly helps. I mean, you don't have to just do it if you want to. I'm not asking you to do it, but just purely if you want to. There's no nothing. But I would appreciate it in anything. So yeah, with that, if you if you really enjoyed videos like this, just yeah, keep on watching and support my content, and your views really mean a lot. So thank you everyone for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video. All right, bye.